Mom, Dad, there's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
Hello and welcome back to Cameron, King of the World. We're almost at the end now. We've covered all of his theatrical films, his documentaries, other films that he was involved in, and I've been getting some comments from you guys and some messages saying, what about this film that he wrote, and what about that film that his wife made? And there's only so many films I can cover, but as far as the broad strokes, and I would argue some of the more delicate, finer strokes, I think I've covered a fair amount in this series, and it's taken quite a while, and I'm glad with how it's all turned out. But all that's left now, really, in these last few videos, is to kind of wrap up. But in this one, I'm going to talk about the future, because that's the cool thing about James Cameron and about any director that you love, I suppose, who's still working, is that there's more to come. The story isn't finished, and there are many directors who I love, like Kurosawa, to name one off the top of my head, who is one of the best filmmakers of all time, and he's passed away decades ago, and so you have a very clear beginning, middle, and end to that career that you can look at and view it from afar. But with James Cameron, there's more to come, and in fact there's 4 more movies to come at the very least, and that's intriguing and exciting. So in this video I'm going to be talking about the future of James Cameron, but obviously more specifically speaking to the Avatar sequels, the history of them, all of the information that's come out, and well, not all of the information, but a fair amount of the information regurgitated through my mouth, the Cliff Notes version, I suppose, of the history of the Avatar sequels, how I feel about them, what my anticipation level is going to be at when the films come out, what it's like now, what it's been since they were first announced to begin with. So we're going to go through that whole journey in this video, and hopefully it won't take too long, but it is me after all. So from a personal perspective, before we get to the details, I was very keen to see an Avatar sequel. When the first film came out, I loved it, was a big fan of it, and was very keen to see a continuation of that world and that story. But it became clear as the years went on that this wasn't going to be some quick, money grab. This wasn't going to be like, right, this is the biggest film of all time, let's capitalize on it now, get those sequels fast-tracked. Cameron took his time and has been taking his time for over 10 years now. And so I appreciate that, and I kind of respect that, and I think it's more proof to me that this isn't, that's the thing, and I've talked about before again and 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 again. It's this whole thing of if a movie is all about making money, any movie that's released theatrically, it's there to make money, and people tend to look down on films that are these big blockbusters because they view them as nothing but the money that they're making. And there's always, well, not always, but a lot of the times there is an actual, creative in the middle there. Amongst all that bullshit and the politics and the suits and the executives and the money, there's a person in the middle of it and a team around them who all care about telling a story and making art. And so with the Avatar sequels, I think that, if they'd gone to him and said, give us a sequel like next year, 2010, I think Cameron would have thrown it away and said, I'm not doing that, because he wants to make it mean something. And I think he wants to always push the technology. I think people criticized him for focusing too much on technology, and I wouldn't say that's an entirely baseless accusation, but I think that the way he does push the technology, in my view and to my tastes and preferences, I think that him pushing the technology benefits the stories that he's telling. And with Avatar, I think, again, pushing the boundaries of visual effects is going to be something that I think it's tricky. I want to say that I feel like Avatar 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 are going to be so revolutionary in terms of the visual effects that we can't even comprehend of what they're going to look like. But I think that'd be overselling it and being a bit too overdramatic. I'm sure that the stuff we see is going to be stuff that we have seen before, but probably executed to a degree that is far crisper and richer and more detailed and more wondrous perhaps than kind of a lot of big VFX heavy films we've seen in the past. I think that taking that time and taking years to work on these films will hopefully pay off. And the thing is, I trust in Cameron, you know. I mean, I'm trying to think, you know, really it's only The Abyss that is The Abyss and True Lies are the two films, oddly enough, that haven't been released on Blu-ray yet. They're the two films that I really, really like, and I love them in their own ways. True Lies less so. Now that I've gone back to it, I didn't quite love it as much as I used to, but you take those two off the table. You look at, you know, the Terminator, Aliens, Terminator 2, Titanic, Avatar, those 5 films are just so unreasonably great. And, you know, his past 2 movies have been masterpieces, in my opinion. So it stands to reason that his next film is at least going to be pretty damn good. And the fact that he's taken so long to make it, as he has done over the past two films of his career, I think will hopefully pay off. And so I'm just more excited than anything. But again, the history of these sequels and how much they've been pushed back has been a part of the story and a part of people's pushback on these sequels, and how, you know, Cameron making these sequels has become something of a running joke and something people poke fun at. And, you know, again, I'm not saying that Disney, who now obviously have owned the properties of 20th Century Fox and now will be releasing the Avatar sequels, I'm not saying Disney are not interested in the money. Of course they are. Of course they are. Now, you know, in March 2021, just halfway through this series, you know, running on my YouTube channel, Avatar reclaimed the #1 spot as the highest grossing film of all time. And I think that that's also going to be a reason, you know, that Disney are going to be happy, because when Avatar 2 comes out, they can push it as the sequel to the highest grossing movie of all time. So there's a business move there. And I think it's a fairly smart one, you know, and you want to make money. And I think for me, I would like to see Avatar 2 make a lot of money, because that would mean the full story can be told, the full story that Cameron wants to tell. I like that it's 4 sequels, which again, I mean, I know it sounds extravagant, but I like that it's not like 2 trilogies. Like, it's not, you know, we're going to do 2 and 3 and then another trilogy. Clearly, things have changed and the story has expanded to the point where it's been whittled down to exactly what he wants, I think. So let's get into kind of some of the details here. The first time a sequel was even mentioned to Avatar was actually in 2006, some 3 years before the first film had come out. So this is obviously when Cameron was working on Avatar and was talking to people and said that, you know, I would like to, this is a story and a film I'd like to see continue beyond if this is a success. Because in 2006 they were reworking how they do motion capture, and there was a lot riding on whether that film would be a success or not, and they just didn't know if it was even going to work with what they wanted to see visually on the screen with the Na'vi and how that would work in the computers. But 2006 was the first time Cameron has on record mentioned wanting to do a sequel. And 2010, not long after the film had become a success in late 2009, sequels are happening. So there was 2 sequels mentioned, and that Cameron wanted to continue. And at that point, I guess you would say that people were thinking maybe he's going to do a trilogy. And it was announced, or at least mentioned, I don't think it was formally announced, but the dates were thrown out there, December 2014 and December 2015. And it was also mentioned that he would be doing back-to-back shooting, similar to films like Lord of the Rings, where it's a big story and they just kind of film it all in one big chunk. Obviously go back and do post-production kind of pickup shooting and things like that, but the main bulk was supposed to be a back-to-back shoot for Avatar 2 and 3. So he had the ideas early on of where he wanted this story to go, which we still don't really know too much about, which I quite like. And I will be talking in this video about the details that are out there about the Avatar sequels. And obviously at this point, if you're not a fan of the Avatar franchise, of the original film, I don't know why you'd be watching this, because I'm a fan of it, and so maybe it'd be interesting to you, I don't know, but I would say that if you're not really into the idea of these Avatar sequels, maybe you won't really enjoy this video all that much. But there is a quote later on, which I will mention, where Cameron talks about the people who didn't like the first film and how that relates to how he thinks they're going to receive the sequels, so stay tuned for that. So that was the first mention, 2010, like, you know, it's going to go ahead and it's going to explore the other moons of the gas planet that Pandora is a moon of, and I think it's called Polyphemus, I think that's how you pronounce it. So going out to other moons was something that was mentioned, and that this may not happen, but back then in 2010, that was one of the things that was mentioned. The first sequel was said to be set and focused on the ocean of Pandora, and that got me really intrigued, and it made a lot of sense because he clearly is interested in water, in going underwater, in deep sea exploration. It makes total sense looking at what he's done in films like The Abyss and with Titanic and the documentaries that he's made, that he would then take that love and passion he has for deep sea ocean exploration and put that into his Avatar world and take that in a different direction. So that sounded cool to me. I remember about 10 years ago reading about that and getting quite excited because I thought that he could do something really beautiful visually with an underwater world. And we kind of saw, I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's going to be so wildly different, but we've seen now a big blockbuster movie that takes place, I want to say largely underwater, but a lot of underwater sequences in Aquaman, which I thought was really fun. I really enjoyed Aquaman, but that was like a big under the ocean kind of epic, and it was very strange and just different visually to see that sort of thing that you don't really see too much of. And so I'll be intrigued to see how Cameron tackles that technically and also just emotionally and through the story and how it fits together. And again, I have faith in Cameron. That's the key thing here, is that I have faith in kind of his direction and the stories that he wants to tell. I don't think he's the greatest storyteller in the world, but I love the way he tells stories, so that excites me. There was talk that he was going to film footage in the Mariana Trench, the deepest trench in the ocean, for the sequel Avatar 2. And I don't know if he actually did that, because in 2014, as we covered earlier in the series on the Deep Sea Challenge documentary review, he did go and did a solo dive, the first person to go solo, down 35-some thousand feet, I think it was, to the bottom of the Mariana Trench to Challenger Deep, and hit the bottom, and did some exploration for about 3 hours. He had cameras there because he was filming it for the documentary, but I don't know if he had cameras there to film something for Avatar 2. But then I don't know really, because when you see what happened when he got to the bottom of the ocean, there's not much there. It's just a seabed. There was no big discovery. There was obviously stuff that he collected, and it was certain kind of scientific things could be noted from that, but it wasn't like he discovered something. It wasn't anything earth-shattering, and so you could you could recreate what that looked like very easily with CGI. It's just a bit of seabed and some murky water, So I don't know whether he took the cameras down there to hopefully capture something great for Avatar 2 and then didn't quite get it, or whether he did. It might just be a fact of he wanted to put a shot in Avatar 2 that is from the real bottom of the real ocean, and I like that idea, but that's complete and total 110% conjecture on my part. I have no idea if that's true. There was just rumblings that he wanted to film stuff in the Mariana Trench for the movie, so that might have just been an intention that never came to pass. But he did, obviously, in 2012. The documentary came out in 2014. In 2012, he did go to the Mariana Trench. So I'd be intrigued as the films begin to come out in the next few years, hopefully. And special edition, special features come out, and we see the documentaries. Maybe some light will be shed on that. In 2011, there was the first mention of high frame rate, and Cameron considering filming Avatar 2 in high frame rate, which would be 48 frames per second, which is something that Peter Jackson experimented with on the Hobbit trilogy. And I saw the first Hobbit film, An Unexpected Journey, in high frame rate in 3D. And it was honestly just awful. Just awful. I hated it. In a fantasy film setting, when you look at something that's 48 frames per second, it looks like video. And so it does look like you're kind of watching an episode of EastEnders with a higher budget. And it makes some of the effects look cheaper. It really... For a fantasy film and for something like Avatar, with Avatar, it's all completely CGI once you're dealing with the Pandora Na'vi sections. But I could imagine the human sections, the live action stuff, looking really rough and just too close to real life. I love that magic kind of golden, spot where 24 frames per second, it's slightly off real life. It's not the way we view things in terms of motion and everything, but there's something, there's just something about it that works, and it's filmic. That's the only way I can describe it. And so I think that in later years, high frame rate HFR didn't really take off or pick up when Peter Jackson was doing it. I know Ang Lee released Gemini Man in 120 frames per second. Now that's an action film where it's supposed to be kind of gritty and realistic, and that to me seems more perhaps in line with doing something like that, experimenting with that. But I really hope that that doesn't come around again, and I really hope that we just see Avatar. For me, I just want to see it in 2D. I'm still not sold on 3D. I know Cameron loves 3D. He wishes, in his perfect world, Cameron has said that every film ever made would be made in 3D, and it's just not for me. It really isn't. And there's been glimmers and moments in 3D movies that I've enjoyed, but there's been nothing that I've really sunk my teeth into and gone, this really makes the movie better. It's never happened even with Avatar. But so in 2011 there was the high frame rate thing was mentioned, and also he talked about how he was designing at that point in 2011 the ecosystem of the ocean, from which obviously Avatar 2 would be focusing on quite heavily. 2012 was the first mention of a third sequel, so Avatar 4. And so this is probably where he's planning out the 2 sequels and realizing he has more story than just 2 movies, unless he's going to do 2 massive 4-hour films, which obviously isn't conducive to the way the movie industry works. So I think that's probably where it splintered off, and then he realized he has 3 stories. In 2013, New Zealand was named and announced as the country of production for the film, and obviously he'd be teaming up with Weta again to do the special effects, but also to film in New Zealand. And also in 2013, it was then announced that it would be 3 sequels. So Avatar 2, Avatar 3, and Avatar 4. That was kind of the confirmed, this is what we're doing. We're doing 3 sequels now. That's the plan. And the release dates for those were then pushed back to 2016, 2017, and 2018. Cameron said that the writing process was very complex and that there were going to be delays and that they just weren't ready yet to go into production. So it was pushed back another year. In 2016, Cameron then announced there would be 4 sequels. So we're now 6 years out from the 2 sequels being announced. Now it's turned into 4 sequels, and the dates have now been pushed back to 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2023. He was also pushing for 3D films in the cinema without the use of glasses. He really wanted to figure out a way to create the technology for glasses-free 3D. And he later kind of disputed that comment and kind of downplayed it a bit, and he thinks that the technology just isn't going to be there for that. So that was one thing that was brought up, around the middle of the past 10 years or so, I think, and then it kind of has been brushed under the carpet. And I'm kind of glad. I'm just looking forward to seeing that world. The 3D element, it doesn't mean too much to me. So whether it be glasses free or not, I don't know. It's tricky because maybe it would be a new experience and I'd be willing to try it. But I just think that, up to a certain point, you're trying to reinvent the wheel, and the wheel, it just works. It just works. They haven't invented a better way to to travel with vehicles. The wheel works perfectly. It just does. 24 frames, 2D. It's just tell me the story. The story is all that matters. The story, the visuals, the emotion. That's the driving force for me, not the gimmick or the format, and being able to see kind of an illusion of depth that I feel like is more of a distraction than something that adds to the overall experience. But that's just me, I suppose. On April of 2017, April 27th, 2017, all 4 sequels were delayed again. They're now pushed to 2020, 2021, and then a 3-year gap, 2024, and finally 2025. So at this point, people are starting to really, I wouldn't say begin to feel a little distrust towards Cameron, but people are starting to feel like, all right, you're pulling our leg here. These films are never going to come out, are they? And that's kind of unfortunate, because I think that it's a positive thing. It's a guy who is looking at what he wants to do and saying, I haven't got time to do all this by that certain date, and I don't want to rush this. And I hate to bring it up, but you look at the most recent Star Wars movie, The Rise of Skywalker, which I loved. There's a lot of great things in it, but there is undoubtedly, you can feel in almost every frame of the film that the people who are writing that and making that film were shitting the bed trying to scramble everything together to get the film finished and to just please everyone. They was just please everyone. Let's just do that, and just we'll bring him back, and they'll kiss, and that'll be confirmed, and then they'll do this and we'll do that. And it felt rushed, even though I think that a lot of the work that went into the production design of that film, and the music and the visual effects and the performances, they really shine. But the story, and that's one thing that releasing those films every 2 years, I think was a hindrance to that Star Wars sequel trilogy, because they hadn't planned it all out beforehand, which is still crazy to me. But with Cameron, he decides, I'm not going to rush this out and make it be a substandard film and story. I'm going to wait until everything is really nailed down. Now, I would agree with the criticism if someone was to push back with that and say, well, why is he announcing it every time? I would say that he's probably not pushing for the announcement, but the studio, 20th Century Fox, probably was, because they, there's a lot that goes into the business side of things, which I know absolutely nothing about, but I'm sure that announcing a release date for a film and getting all that kind of stuff in place for some sort of infrastructure for releasing a big film like that is vital and very important. And also, when you have a deadline, people are going to work probably faster, or at least, really pick up the pace. And I don't know why I'm going off on this tangent, but Hayao Miyazaki, one of the greatest directors of all time, in my opinion, is currently working on his next film. He's retired like 5 or 6 times, and whenever he released a film, it was working to a strict deadline, and he was able to crank out these masterpieces in a few years. His current film he's been working on for many years now, and they've decided to do it differently and work with no deadline. And I think he's completed something like 30% of the film. If he keeps going at the rate he's going, Miyazaki, he's going to finish this film, I think, in about 15 to 20 years. So it just isn't feasible, I don't think. So at some point, they're going to have to impose a deadline for him to kind of crank up the pace. But then, do you rush art? You look how long it took Tolkien to write Lord of the Rings, especially when he was going into a process where if he didn't like where the story was going, he would just stop and start the book from the very beginning again. So for him, I think it was like 12, 13 years to write Lord of the Rings. So do you put a timer on art? But at the same time, I think having a deadline and really pushing yourself to come up with solutions to these story problems can really help you to think outside the box and put you in a different mindset. So it's a minefield of, judging how people are doing things, and especially with big movies like this. And why is he announcing this? And then he's always pushing it back and delaying it. It's always disappointing. But it's funny to me that people are acting disappointed that the films keep getting pushed back, even though they seem to hate the films anyway, or hate the idea of the films even existing. So there seems to be a bit of a contradiction going on there. But then there are people who are just like, they revel in the delays and they hope the films never come out. So that's kind of a whole other situation. Anyway, May 2019, the films were pushed again to December 2021, 2022, a year break, 2024, and then 2026. And at this point in time, May of 2019, I was wondering, because now 20th Century Fox has been acquired by Disney, if it was either around that time or sometime around that, in 2019, I believe, is when that takeover happened. It was pretty recently. And I was thinking, okay, so they're mapping out what they're doing with the Star Wars movies, and it's like this coveted December release slot. And so if you look at 2021, 2022, 2024, 2026, it seemed to be dodging all of the Star Wars things they had planned in terms of future movies. And so I did wonder if Disney was trying to play it to the point where every December they have a Star Wars movie, an Avatar movie, maybe a Marvel movie. I know this December 2021, I think the big one they're going for is the new Spider-Man film. So I think that Disney really want to own that December big family kind of market, even though at this point in time that kind of thing doesn't really exist anymore. But I think it will again in years to come. Maybe not this December, but certainly in years to come. I think that December period and making a lot of money is going to happen again. Now, August of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, was when the final announcement was made, final up until this point in time, that the Avatar sequels were once again pushed back. Again, it's the 8th delay in total. Since those sequels were first announced, it's the 8th delay. So now Avatar 2 at least is scheduled to be released on December 16th, 2022, with presumably Avatar 3 to follow either the next year or the year afterwards. But as far as like 4 release dates, I don't think we're there yet anymore. And I think with the Disney takeover, now that they own not Marvel, but they do own Marvel, they own everything, but now that they own the Avatar intellectual property, I'm not sure if they're kind of reconfiguring where the plan is as far as Cameron is concerned. And I think that he said in recent interviews over the past couple of years that, he's doing 2 and 3, 4 and 5 are going to kind of rest on whether or not the first 2 are successful, so that he can get the green light to make the next 2 films and to finish off the whole story. But there have been conflicting reports, conflicting comments. I think that the Disney chair, I think he's the chairman or the CEO, whatever, Bob Iger, has said that 2 and 3 are happening, 4 and 5 are kind of suspended there a little bit. And then the producer of the franchise, John Landau, who's worked with Cameron as a producer on Titanic and Avatar, the first one, has said that that's not the case and that all films are happening. So it's a bit up in the air. No one seems to know exactly what's happening, but for now, and I feel like this is probably the home stretch, because as I'm going to say in this video, they have now finished Avatar 2 and 3 in terms of filming. And so that's something that hasn't been there throughout most of the delays. So now it's just post-production, which is going to take a long time. But, they worked through the pandemic, and I think it was the first major Hollywood blockbuster to go back into production after the pandemic hit last March in 2020. So they've been hard at work on the film and have been doing a lot, and we're going to get into that with some more of my digging and research. The one thing that kind of concerns me about the films a little bit, and almost is disheartening, is the fact that Cameron hasn't written the films. And this is something he's always done. He's always been the writer of his movies, from The Terminator to Aliens, The Abyss, Terminator 2. He had a co-writer on that, but then True Lies, Titanic, and Avatar, they were all films that he wrote, and he prided himself on his writing and being a writer. But for the Avatar sequels, all of them, he had hired different screenwriters, and not even one person, again, different people, and assigned them to different movies and got them all together. It was like, you'll do 2, you'll do 3, you'll do 4, you'll do 5. And I'm not sure, this is a process that took 4 years, which is an incredibly long period of time to write movies, I think. Even though it's a long process, I think 4 years, especially when each person is doing, a different movie. It's not like one person is having to write 4 films. But obviously Cameron is heavily involved in the story and what is going to happen, and reading what they're writing and approving of this and maybe not approving of that. So I'm sure that he's still very hands-on, but I feel like it's probably something he should have written himself. I'm not entirely sure. But then again, it could be the case that it turns out that they're written better this way. We really don't know, and I'm not sure what the process was of picking these screenwriters, but we have Josh Friedman, Rich Jaffa, Amanda Silva, and Shane Salerno, who were announced in 2012, all the way back when, to do work on the sequels, and then that expanded by the time we got to, I think, was it 2016, I said, when it was like 4 sequels are happening, and so they've all been assigned, and it's been 4 years to write the 4 individual scripts, and he, as he said, that it's been a long time and many delays to nail that writing down. So again, it was nothing he rushed into. It was like, let's take the time. And it can't be cheap to hire writers on a 4-year basis. I'm not sure about any of the, the financials of that, but it's something that, obviously a lot of time and money has gone into this project so far. An unbelievable amount of time and money, no doubt. So, but I'm unsure. I'm on the fence about the fact that Cameron's not writing these. That's an interesting thing. Anyway, so for Avatar 2, preliminary shooting began on August 15th of 2017 in California. So they started kind of a soft start to photography, I guess. I'm not entirely sure what they did, but they started to film some stuff in August, and then principal photography in full began on September 25th of 2017, concurrently with Avatar 3. So they were going to shoot 2 and 3 back to back, and this is all motion capture stuff, performance capture. And Zoe Saldana wrapped her role in Avatar 2 and 3 as Neytiri on June the 8th, 2018. So it was a very long, it was 130 days of performance capture shots for Avatar 2 and 3. And by mid-2018, that stuff was done. So in November of 2018, Cameron announced that performance capture had been completed, but he still has live-action stuff left to film for both movies. He said the vast majority of the sequel's running time is CGI, but that pesky live-action component is going to cost me 5 months over both movies. And it's interesting that choice of words where he's like, that pesky live-action stuff is going to cost me 5 months of my life. It feels like he's so done with filming movies in the regular way, and he had so much fun and creative freedom in doing the performance capture stuff with Avatar. And, you know, having the camera in a virtual space that he could direct these scenes that he'd already captured, it's such a wild thing to think about, where an actor comes on the stage, they do their performance, and then maybe a year later, Cameron loads up the performance in a virtual space and then takes a virtual camera to kind of adjust where he wants the camera to be for that performance, and it's all still retained and recorded. It's very strange. And as I said in the Journey to Pandora video, it blows my mind because there's almost too many options there. You know, there is, I feel like there's a beauty to, and this is a whole other tangent I'm going to fucking go into, and I really shouldn't, but I can't because it's me. There's really a beauty, I think, to when you make a film, and not that I've done it before, but, you know, you're on the set, you've got everything set up, the actors are there, and you film, and you pick where the camera goes, and that's it. You can't, you know, 2 months later in the edit, change the camera angle, unless you're filming coverage. So, you know, you got to get it right then and there. And that to me then also translates to how I grew up as a kid in kind of a pre-digital world, at least in a wildly commercially available sense. And you have these little kind of cameras, disposable cameras or film cameras, where you get to take 28 pictures or whatever it is, and you got to make them count. You know, and so you have these wonderful albums of memories and when you're a kid, and it's like just a certain amount of photographs, you know. And it's like, oh, I want to see more photographs, but there's just that amount, and it leaves you wanting a little bit more. Whereas these days, you get your phone out and you've got thousands of pictures in there, and it's just overkill, I think. And I'm guilty of it, you know. Whenever I take a picture of something, I take like 2 or 3 just to make sure that the focus is good on at least one of them. But there's just so much of it. It's just like and it almost stresses me out that there's so much stuff out there, and with pictures and memories and videos, and even my YouTube channel, there's just so much of it that I don't know, I think it's overwhelming at times. And so thinking about how much freedom Cameron has with these films, there's no wonder it's taking so fucking long for him to get done. But so it's just funny to me how that the live action stuff seemed to be an impediment to him. You know, it made me laugh. I know that he still enjoys it, but I think that his heart is fully set now on creating stories in that way. And at least for Avatar, I think that it's something that's worth exploring further. So the live action portion of Avatar 2 and 3 began production in New Zealand in the spring of 2019, and then wrapped and concluded on November 29th of 2019 for a certain period of time, with still some stuff left to pick up in 2020. And that is when COVID-19 hit, the coronavirus pandemic hit the world, and everything halted. But virtual production continued in California. So this is where they're obviously working with the stuff they've already captured, and they're now doing what they can in the world that we lived in back, you know, a year ago when the pandemic was I don't know if it was at its worst or anything, because there's been second waves and stuff, but, you know, when it was really deep in the thing where no one knew what was going on, they continued to kind of bunker down and get virtual production continuing. And it was June 16th of 2020 that they went back to New Zealand and resumed filming, and was the first big film to begin shooting again, with obviously guidelines in place and safety. And obviously in New Zealand, the pandemic was certainly nowhere near the level. You know, in fact, you can't even begin to explain how different it was over there, and still is over there, compared to the rest of the world, or most of the world, and how well they handled that situation, the pandemic, and the precautions and guidelines and everything. So in September 2020, filming completed. The live action stuff was done in New Zealand. And Weta Digital have been working, you know, on visual effects since 2017. So that's been, at this point, 4 years in the making. So they're really deep into this now. So I think that all this talk of, you know, oh, when are they ever going to come out? They're never going to come out. I think that, you know, he's just been taking his time. And a lot of things have gotten in the way. A lot of things have, and I'm sure it's going to be a really interesting story to tell when they're all done with this. And I hope we get the same level of behind the scenes material that we got with the first Avatar film, because I'm really intrigued to see that long journey to get the sequels off the ground, and in the case of Avatar 2, Into the Water. Which brings me to my next point, which is the underwater motion capture that was a big part of at least, again, I don't know if this is going to carry over to the other 3 films, but at least with Avatar 2, and with the teasers, you know, years and years ago about Avatar 2 being focused on the ocean of Pandora, a new system for motion capture was developed. It took them a year and a half to develop this because filming actors underwater with motion capture suits on, the markers which the computer recognizes on the body and records the movement and everything, the markers were being mirrored by the reflection from the water, and so it's creating all these false markers which that's not capturing anything. So there was a lot of things they had to do which I don't know, and I don't think they've really gone into it in really specific technicalities, but they had to devise a new system of doing motion capture to do it underwater. And one of the things I think is, why bother? Like, I think that you can simulate that just by doing CGI and maybe just studying underwater movement or filming reference footage and things. But no, Cameron wants to be as legit as possible, and if there's a large part of the film taking place underwater with these characters who are real actors, he wants as much of their performance to be in that character as possible. And I respect that, but again, it goes to kind of almost the Abyss level, where it's like, is this really worth it? But this is completely different, because doing underwater motion capture, you're not kind of going down and working in very dangerous conditions, and a lot of the stuff that they do is just using props for what is meant to be like the real stuff that they're working with and interacting with. And so I think it's probably very safe, much different than the Abyss, and obviously not even going down as deep, I would imagine, either. But he was getting all the cast trained in freediving, to the point where they would, the cast would learn to, go underwater while holding their breath for like many, many minutes. So it was a big part of the film, at least Avatar 2, was the freediving aspect, for the cast to train to do that, and obviously the crew, and to capture motion, performance underwater. And so I'm really intrigued to see how that'll, pan out, and if it'll be just a completely different. I don't know how they did that stuff in Aquaman. I think maybe there were wires involved. I really don't know, actually. But I would imagine, because that's actual actors doing that stuff. I think in Aquaman, I think that the hair is all CGI, which is quite impressive, actually. It doesn't look that bad or anything, but with Avatar, obviously, it's all CGI, but the movement is going to be based on something that's much more realistic, and so that's going to be intriguing to see. And again, I'm endlessly intrigued to see where he's going to go next with this story and this world, because for me, he always delivers, especially with a sequel. Look at his history with sequels. They're pretty damn good. He hasn't really failed yet as far as the sequel is concerned, and I would argue he hasn't really failed yet as far as a movie. At least, I mean, again, I wouldn't call The Abyss a failure or True Lies a failure, because they do very well what they're trying to do. But it's the other 5 films that he's made that I think are so brilliant and almost universal in many ways. Some more than others, I suppose. But I think that again, and I'm biased because he's one of my favorite directors, but I do genuinely think that he is a brilliant filmmaker and visual storyteller. So for me, just any film that he comes out with is going to be something that will, pique my interest and perk my ears up, and I'll be, there day one if possible. Now, if Avatar 2 had come out, during the pandemic, I wouldn't have gone. That's a line I would draw. And there are people who went back to the cinema last year, and I'm not going to make this about COVID, but that's the only thing that would stop me. But, if it comes out and that there's nothing else stopping me, anything like a pandemic, then I'm going to be there day one. I'm going to be really excited to see what happens and visually. And we haven't seen a trailer yet either, not even a hint. There's been concept art, I think in 2018 perhaps, or 2017. I can't remember exactly when. I didn't research it either, but there was a few years ago, there was some teasers, I think on the official Twitter page, of concept art of some of these different locations on Pandora, different parts of that world to see, and a lot of it seemed water-based and stuff. It's very exciting. We saw a glimpse of that in the first movie when all the clans come together for the final, and there's like a shot of them flying on the Banshees over the water, and it's like just a little peek and a hint of what we could see of a different kind of location on that moon. And it's again, it's exciting to me. And as far as batting averages go for Cameron when it comes to sequels, he's doing pretty fucking good. So I'm kind of very, very optimistic about Avatar 2, I have to say. Now, the cast. We obviously have Zoe Saldana and Sam Worthington coming back as Neytiri and Jake Sully. Sigourney Weaver is back, and I don't know how many films she's scheduled to be in, but she has said in interviews that she's playing a new character. But there was a Twitter post of her filming the new movies, and she's dressed as Grace Augustine. And to me, it looked like they might be filming a flashback, maybe on the little kind of bunker that they took up into the mountains in the first movie. And And it feels weird to say in the first movie when the sequels aren't out yet, but I guess it's part of a wider franchise now. We just haven't seen anything of the next couple of films. But I think it might be a flashback sequence perhaps, but she's saying also that she's playing a new character. So I'm very intrigued. We've seen her in the motion capture stuff in the underwater set, so she obviously does some of that stuff. So, I mean, maybe we could see flashbacks of her with the freediving clan of the Na'vi. I mean, that's entirely possible, but she did say she's playing a new character. That might be a bit of a bait and switch, we don't know. Stephen Lang is back as Quaritch. Perhaps Stephen Lang was told, even when making the original Avatar by James Cameron, that there's more to this character. Your character has a future. So, I mean, it's science fiction. You can pretty much do anything, but I'm kind of hesitant about that aspect of it. I love Sigourney Weaver. If there's a way to get her in there that makes sense, I'm over the moon. And obviously there is, because she's in the movie and she's filmed it. But Stephen Lang, Quaritch, I mean, I'm not sure. And it's been said that it's been said, confirmed that he will be the main antagonist in all 4 sequels, and that his role will involve motion capture. I don't know what the fuck that means. Is he going to be some mutated clone? I don't know. And he's he's a one-note kind of cartoony character that I think works really well in the context of that first Avatar story, but I don't think that is a character for me. I mean, he plays them very well, but there isn't much nuance there to carry over a villain for 4 movies. So, again, I got faith in Cameron, but this is where my faith starts to waver just a little bit. The Giovanni Ribisi, is that how you say his name? He's back as Parker Selfridge, the guy who kind of works for the company and is interested in the unobtainium and everything. Joel David Moore is back as Norm, the guy who also was working on the Avatar program, and he's the one who kind of gets a little bit jealous of Jake in the first movie, and I like him. He's good. I'm glad that he's coming back and everything. Dileep Rao is coming back as Max Patel. I like this character. CCH Pounder is coming back as Moat, the mother of Neytiri. And Kate Winslet will be in Avatar 2 or 3, we're not sure yet, as Ronal, who is a Na'vi, a freediver of the Metkaina clan. So this is going to be one of the new groups of characters in the film. The Metkaina clan are going to be the free divers, and that's where the ocean element comes into it. Cliff Curtis, who I'm a big fan of, I really like him as an actor. He's playing Tonowari, who is the leader of the reef people, the clan of the Metkaina. So good actors coming in, for new parts. And we also have Michelle Yeoh, Jermaine Clement as human doctors. Vin Diesel has been cast in an undisclosed role, so there's some really good talent coming into this. And the one that really intrigues me cast-wise is Una Chaplin, who is, I believe, the granddaughter of Charlie Chaplin. She's playing Varang, who is described as a strong and vibrant character who spans the entire saga. And I think I've seen her in one thing, but it might be a mother, perhaps Geraldine Chaplin, who I've seen in more things. So I'm not entirely sure about Una, but that's cool. I like the idea of that. There's a mystique to that description that I really enjoy. And also we have 3 new characters. I don't know the actors who play them, but they're young actors. And I'm obviously it's motion capture, so the age doesn't matter as much, but they're filming these films over such a long period of time. I wonder whether the voices are breaking or whether the age of the actors is going to come into it. But the 3 children of Jake and Neytiri. They have 2 sons, Natiam and Loak, and then an 8-year-old daughter called Tuktiri, or Tuk. And I believe that the daughter, you can think about Newt and certainly kind of, the great fondness people have for that character in Cameron's, Aliens, and it seems like Tuk is going to be more of the focus as far as the children are concerned. Cameron even described that there's a certain scene in, I think, Avatar 2, in which we see an argument play out between Jake and Neytiri, entirely from her perspective, looking up, I suppose. And it's a big kind of argument scene. So I have a feeling that Tuk will be the most important of the children moving forward with the stories. And Cameron has described all 4 sequels and the overall story as a generational family saga, much like the Godfather films, which makes me think that we might end up doing more time jumps. And actually, I haven't got to this point yet, but Avatar 2 will be set 13 years after the original film. and it's described that Jake and Neytiri now have a family. They're forced to leave their home and explore different regions of Pandora as an old threat returns to finish what it started. Again, I am worried about that one. I'm worried about the idea of Quaritch coming in, to kind of be the bad guy again. I'm really unsure about that. Cameron has said that the sequels will be a natural extension of the characters, the themes, and the spiritual undercurrents of the first film. And a very interesting quote that he said, which kind of made me laugh, was, if you loved the first film, then you're going to love these movies. If you hated the first film, then you're probably going to hate these movies. But if you loved the first film, and then you later said that you hated it, you're probably going to love these films. So he's kind of recognizing that there was a lot of people who turned their back very quickly on Avatar, and he feels like he's going to win them back around again. I like that confidence, I have to say. He's also said that there's going to be more emphasis on entertainment in these sequels as opposed to the environmentalist message of the first film, which makes sense to me. He really said, I think, maybe not all that he has to say about it, but he said a lot about the way that we treat the world, and there's a big theme of that in Avatar, and I'm sure that will color the story and the spirit of some of the characters in the Avatar sequels. But focusing more on entertainment and telling a big, grand, epic fantasy adventure story, I think, is probably where he's going to really focus it. And as he has said, he said as much that he'll pull back a bit on the environmentalist stuff and focus more on just entertaining people, which I think is a good thing. And if every film was to be really nailing it home about the environment and stuff, I think that it would work and fit the world. But he's kind of really done a great job of telling that story within the character story of Avatar, I think, in the first film. He has also said that the sequels, and again, it's hard to tell whether he means the whole 4 sequel story or whether it's just Avatar 2, but he says it's about what happens when warriors grow up and have their own kids. So obviously Jake and Neytiri, he became this warrior. I mean, he was already a warrior as a soldier, I suppose, but it was a completely different feel when he became part of the Na'vi and part of that clan in the first film. But the idea of what happens to warriors when their kids grow up, and that leads me to believe that we might be, and again, he's name-dropped The Godfather, so perhaps by Avatar 4 and 5, we won't see Neytiri or Jake Sully. We'll be focusing on Took, maybe the 3 kids, maybe one of the kids dies, and that's part of the drama. And I think maybe by the 5th film, we might be seeing adult children of the characters that we saw in the first film, and that would be really exciting to me. I mean, as much as I really like the character of Neytiri, and I enjoy the character well enough of Jake Sully, I think that there could be a really cool way to tell this long, spanning, overarching story that takes 5 movies and takes you on a huge, epic journey. So I like that, and I like it feels like Cameron's tackling parenthood, and he's kind of touched on maternal themes in Aliens and in Terminator 2, but I think that more of a kind of balanced kind of look at parenthood with a father and a mother and their kids, and the nature of them being warriors and threats, and as it said in the very, very vague description that they're forced to leave their home. It'll be intriguing to see how that dynamic plays out between the Sully family, I guess. I don't know whether Neytiri is going to take his name, whether he's going to take hers or not, or whether Jake Sully continues to be a part of his name or not. I'm not sure. And maybe he gets a Na'vi name. I'm not sure. There's so many ways they could go with that. And it made me think of how Cameron has become a parent. I mean, I think he had kids. He started to have kids and children a very long time ago. But currently he has younger kids with his current wife, who you see in the documentary Deep Sea Challenge from 2012, released in 2014. And he talks, about how he felt like going down to the bottom of the ocean. It was so dangerous, and he could die if something goes wrong. And he has young kids to think about, and that's a responsibility. But he also said, and I've talked about this in a previous video, but if you haven't seen it, and just to reiterate, because it ties into what I think he might be tapping into as far as telling these stories, coming up with Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5. He talks about how he feels like he can inspire his children more than just by his physical presence, in the actions that he does, in the life he chooses to lead, and that he felt it was an important thing to do despite the risks. And I'm sure many parents would disagree with that, as I think I said before as well, but I think that might be something that was on his mind at the time, was, can maybe Jake and Neytiri inspire their children more than just by surviving and being there for them, giving them the tools to survive and fend for themselves, but also inspiring them to do the right thing, even if it is dangerous. And that will probably tie in to kind of a larger story about, sacrifice and struggle and oppression and all that kind of stuff that goes along with these kinds of science fiction, fantasy, adventure, action stories. So yeah, that made me think of that, about him maybe really tackling parenthood in these upcoming films. Now, the last thing I want to say is, and it's not really, there's not much more to really add to this, but there was a leak a year or two ago of the 4 titles for Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5. And, people were wondering whether these were legit or not. And Cameron did come out and say, yeah, they're real titles, but nothing is confirmed. These are just titles that have been thrown around as possibilities. Nothing's set. These are just potential titles for some of the upcoming movies. So in order, it would be Avatar, The Way of Water, Avatar, The Seed Bearer, Avatar, The Tolkien Rider, and Avatar, The Quest for Awa. Now, The Way of Water, I quite like it. Maybe the wording could be tweaked a little bit. But again, it might be a bit too on the nose if we're really going ocean-themed with that second film. The Seed Bearer seems a bit pulpy and, I don't know, maybe a bit like B-movie-ish. I don't know. I'm not sure if that entirely works. The Tolkien Rider feels almost a bit too specific to one person, perhaps. But again, those kinds of titles have worked in the past for different big blockbuster movies. And then finally, The Quest for Awa. And obviously, Awa is a big part of the lore and the world of Avatar. And I think that potentially might be a hint that the final film will be really focusing on that deep lore and spirituality of the world and the Na'vi. And I would really enjoy that. And I like the title Quest for Awa. That's my favorite of the 4 that were leaked and potential titles. But I'm sure he'll come up with better stuff. And, it's just one of those things that was interesting because it came out. I was like, oh, those aren't like the best titles for the films. But, I think that sometimes it's difficult, especially with the perception of people looking at Avatar as and the sequels as this far off thing that's never going to happen. It was easier to poke fun at the titles. I think if they just, if they came out as they came out, it might be different, and you're more accepting of it, I guess. But so those are potential titles for the films. David Thewlis is another actor who's confirmed to be a part of the film, a part of the sequels, and his kind of involvement has been a little bit shady. Like, people have said he's going to be in Avatar 2, and he said, no, I'm not in Avatar 2, I'm in 3 through 5, and I'm playing a Na'vi character, and it's a big role, and, there's just lots of hazy information, which is fine, because again, Avatar 2 is still 20-some months away, and we haven't seen any footage, and haven't really, it's just been like the basic outline of Avatar 2, and set 13 years later, and there's a threat, and an old villain returns, so it's not too much to go off of, but yeah, so overall, that's kind of the timeline, very roughly, of things that I thought were relevant to say. And you can see some cool updates on the Avatar Twitter page of, pictures of them filming and doing the underwater stuff. And I'm excited. I really am excited, and I have faith in Cameron. I've said it before. I won't retread this point too heavily, but there are people who say, why can't he have done other things? And the simple, clear answer to me is because he didn't want to. Why would you want him to make a film that he didn't have his heart in? Because then it wouldn't be the same, and it wouldn't be a James Cameron film. And the same can be said for any director, but obviously many directors have to make a film that they need to make for whatever reason that might be going against their artistic drive and where they want to go and the stories they want to tell, because sometimes they just need a job and they just get brought in as a hired hand, and sometimes they have to take that job. Cameron is in the luxury of the position where he doesn't need to just take a job. He can do what he wants. And what he wants to do is tell this story. So you can either sit down and be told this story, or you can just forget about it and move on with your life. But either way, this kind of mythical kind of series of movies he could have made in the past 10, 12 years, if they were to happen, it would be something that he wasn't interested in anyway, so there'd be no point, and it wouldn't be the film that you would like and want to, that you would expect anyway. So I just think it's a weird thing when people moan about that. But and again, people are worried about, it's going to fail, and people, he thinks he's going to make all this money, and I don't think that's the one thing I can end this whole thing on. Do I think Avatar 2 is going to become the next number 1 highest grossing film of all time? Will he pull it off 3 movies in a row? Absolutely not. But never count out James Cameron. Titanic came along and people thought it was going to bomb. It was going to be this big embarrassment in Hollywood. People were looking forward to him failing, and it became what it became. Avatar, it looked like the stupid, weird blue cat movie. Again, people thought it was going to bomb, and he'd gone far too weird and spent far too long away from the industry and hadn't been making movies in a while. And he's putting out this weird movie that's going to tank. It became the highest grossing film of all time again. And the whole kind of end game thing where they re-released Avatar in China this month and it's now taken back the top spot, that, off the table, I don't think it has the momentum. I think it being a sequel puts in a built-in expectation from the fans and also from the people who want to see it fail and the people who really didn't like Avatar. So there is this pre-built-in dislike for the franchise that I think is going to affect the ticket sales for sure. There's going to be people, even if the trailers are spectacular, I think that people are they're going to balk at it and they're not going to want to see it. And I think that will mean that it's just not going to capture the zeitgeist. It's not going to capture a moment or a feeling in the way that Avatar did, because it kind of came out of nowhere and surprised people, and in the way that Endgame did, because it just really satisfied fans who had been following those movies for 10 years, and there was such an investment behind it that is nowhere near. The Avatar franchise has nothing on Marvel, and it's a different world. It's a different type of storytelling in a lot of ways, similar in others, I suppose, but I think that Endgame was just this natural thing where everyone in the world was going to show up for that because everyone was invested, and those movies are like perfect date movies to go on, and so people have been going to see those films casually for so many years, and it was this big culmination. Avatar, it was this one film and then nothing for 12, 13 years, or however long it's going to be before Avatar 2 comes out. And there's been comic books and the ride at Disney and all that sort of stuff, but there hasn't been anything that's been keeping the public consciousness going and thinking about it, actively, beyond people like me who love the film and love James Cameron and do stupid series like this. So I think that it's going to be tricky for them to, business-wise, to drum up the interest again for Avatar 2. But again, you can never count James Cameron out, and I'll be very intrigued to see what happens. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll see a special edition chapter of Cameron, King of the World, continuing on, maybe chapter 32, talking about Avatar 2 in the future. Wouldn't that be something? Be intriguing to see how it does financially, just out of the curiosity aspect, but I couldn't care less as long as the film makes enough money that Avatar 3 gets enough money to be finished and completed, and he gets to tell his whole story. I want to see the whole story, I trust in Cameron. That might sound like I'm being a shill or I'm being way too biased, and I agree that I'm biased because I love his films, but, I like what I like, and what he does, I like. So there we go. So that's been the brief 1+ hour story of the Avatar sequels, and again, just scratching the surface. But again, those details have been very scant. They've come out here and there. There's been nothing really big or solid or a big announcement, I feel, that has come out yet. Even some of the concept art that was released was, it was just there. Oh, that's cool. There hasn't been yet a moment where it's like, here we go. This is happening, and then this is a big tease of what's to come. So in the next year or so, I would imagine we're going to get a trailer, and it's going to ramp up, and I can't wait to see the journey of anticipating it, but more importantly, I can't wait to be sat in the cinema, hopefully next December, watching this film and seeing what it's all about. I'm very excited. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you with the next one.